Deficit as a share of GDP. I hope now I've given you a sense of why it shot up so rapidly during perestroika. This is the effect of Gorbachev buying off all these interest groups. And the cost of these deals is enormous, and so the Soviet Union's budget deficit shoots up to 10% of GDP. By 1988, 10% of GDP is roughly the US budget deficit in 2009, so at the worst of the crisis. And then the US budget deficit fell quickly thereafter. The Soviet Union's budget deficit increases quickly thereafter. By 1991, it's at something like a third of GDP, which is larger than Greece's budget deficit at the height of the Eurozone crisis. These are tremendous numbers, all created by Gorbachev's surge of spending to buy political support. Now, it's often argued that this is really just a result of oil, that if oil prices had stayed high, the Soviet Union would have been fine, wouldn't have faced any problems. And indeed, it's true that oil export revenue declines along with international oil prices in the late 1980s. Here we have a chart of this right here. But what we also see is that the scale of the budget deficit increase was far larger than the scale of the decrease in oil prices. So when you look at the data, at most, the decline in oil prices explains maybe 20–25% of the increase in the budget deficit. This is a chart of the amount of the budget deficit financed by printing rubles, billions of rubles. And as you can see, there's basically no printing of rubles until 1985, and then it shoots upwards in the late 1980s, creating the surge of inflation that froze the Soviet economy and eventually led to collapse. Now, in a market economy, when you have a massive increase in the money supply, prices go up. This is kind of a basic axiom of economics. But in a planned economy, when you have prices controlled, as they were in the Soviet Union, prices can't go up because they're controlled by the state. So here's just 4 indices of prices in the late 1980s. And as you can see, there's basically no change in prices from 1986 to 1989. So the money supply is shooting upwards, but prices can't change at all. And so the effect of that is to force production to stop. And the reason is that on black markets, prices are shooting up because they're not controlled. But most production was happening in legal markets where prices were controlled. So if you were a baker deciding whether to bake bread that day, you could only sell your bread for the exact same price as you could sell it for yesterday or the day before or the day before. That was a state-controlled price of bread. But you knew that on the black market, the value of your ruble was plummeting. And so by 1989 or 1990, the baker just decided to stop producing bread. It just wasn't worth it to sell bread for worthless rubles. And so people stopped producing, supply chains froze, the economy just ground to a halt in 1989, 1990, and 1991. And Gorbachev found his authority